Cool Metallica shirt. Can you name 3 songs?
You doubt the fact that she could possibly listen to them based simply on the fact that she's a woman? What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and the last couple of videos I've done have been kind of lighthearted, which is fun, but today I wanted to switch it up and talk about something a little bit more serious that I've been meaning to talk about for a while: women in rock. And just to cut right to the chase, to be completely honest, I think rock really just does not like women all that much. I know that may seem like a harsh statement. I know that's probably already upset a few people, and I'm probably gonna lose some subscribers over this, but I think it's just the truth, and it needs to be said, just in case you forgot. Women are 50% of the population, and pushing away half of the people who could be potential artists or fans of the genre is just not a good idea. And so in this video, I'm gonna look at a few different ways that I see that happening, some of which you probably have seen, some of which I really don't hear people talk about, so we can call it out, put a stop to it, and make rock a healthier place, more welcoming for women and just everybody in general. The first thing I wanted to talk about is the double standard that I see. That women, specifically female artists, are judged by a different set of standards than male artists. Basically, they're judged way more harshly than their male peers would be. For example, look at any time somebody brings up Hayley Williams or Gwen Stefani, to name 2 people. What's the first thing that you see people bring up with them? Probably that they're sellouts, that they just used the scene as a way to get popular, they never really cared about the music, that they went pop, and that was their plan all along. That they were never like real rockers or whatever. Gwen the satanic twit Stefani is about the biggest poser to come from the American punk spurt. My point is that when you bring up those 2 or other women like them, you see a level of anger that you just don't see about very many male artists. Because women are held to a different standard than men. We're way, way harder on women. Another example is Olivia Rodrigo. She had that song Driver's License a couple months ago. Her new song Good For You is probably the most popular debut rock song from an artist in 10 or 20 years or something. But of course, a huge portion of the conversation around her is that she's an industry plant because she came from Disney. She was on High School, the musical, the series, or whatever it was. And so because of that, there's all these people rushing to discredit her and call her an industry plant. Well, maybe that's true, but nobody says that about Jared Leto, for example, but he came from the same system that she did. His big breakthrough as an entertainer was being on My So-Called Life, which was a dumb teenage soap opera basically in the 90s that also made Claire Danes famous, but nobody calls him an industry plant. Another example of that, Billie Eilish. And why is that? Is it just a coincidence that 90% of the people we call industry plants happen to be young women? I don't think it is. I also came across this article about Willow Smith, Jada Pinkett and Will Smith's daughter, who has a pop punk song out now that's pretty good. And she's talking about the experience her mom had with her nu metal band back in the day called Wicked Wisdom, which you may remember played Ozfest for I think a year. I've always wanted to do this type of music, and I've always been afraid to do so, Smith told White, because I saw the hate and verbal abuse that my mom had to go through, and that stuck with me. She actually got lots of death threats. It would be mostly through letters, though. When she was on stage, people would say violent things and throw shit at her. Being a black woman in the metal crowd is very, very different on top of the pressures that the music industry puts on you. Now, it's like an added pressure of the metal culture, the metal world, and just rock in general. This is exactly what I'm talking about. She literally says she's scared to play rock because of how the fans are going to treat her. Was Wicked Wisdom a great band? No, they weren't great, but there were lots of shitty nu metal bands that played Ozfest. And is it a coincidence that the band with a black woman in it was treated extra badly? I don't think it is. Another thing that you see come up a lot with women, especially like Hayley and Gwen, is this whole narrative that they somehow screwed over the rest of the band, that they were conniving behind the scenes all along to take all the money and hog the spotlight and stab the other people in the band in the back. Which again, I don't think is true. I think they just happen to be breakout stars that outshine the rest of the band. But again, do we say the same thing about their male counterparts? Is anybody saying that about Gerard Way or Davey Havok? No, because women are held to a different standard. And what I think is really gross about this particular narrative is all this incel energy that's kind of simmering under the surface. This idea that women are conniving and untrustworthy, that they're out to get you. It's this goes back so far in our culture. This literally goes back to the Bible, where poor Adam just wanted to hang out in the Garden of Eden, but Eve tricked him into taking a bite out of the apple, and that's when it was all over. I mean, listen to the way this person talks about Gwen Stefani. Gwen Stefani saved a generation of young men from lifelong misery of marriage by evolving from a teenage fantasy to an unsufferable tramp before our eyes. If Gwen can't keep you at home, no woman would. And speaking of which, that brings up another example of this: women being judged or viewed primarily through the lens of their appearance. Gwen Stefani must be a vampire. Look at her today. She's over 50 and looks exactly the same. And then someone replies, good genetics and plastic surgery. Again, it's a double standard. Is anybody speculating about what plastic surgery Dave Grohl had? No, because nobody cares. They only talk about women in this way. And the example that really crystallizes this to me is the way that people think about Cardi B versus Tim Lambesis. Anytime we bring up Cardi B, you're gonna get a million comments from butthurt dudes talking about how she drugged and robbed guys at the strip club back when she was a stripper, and how that makes her a horrible person and will never support her, and she should be in prison and blah, blah, blah. But the way people talk about Tim Lambesis is the exact opposite of that. In Tim's case, you bring him up and it's like, well, I don't know, man. I don't see what's the big deal here. He made a mistake. He paid his debt. Why don't you just move on? Why do you keep hanging on this? We're gonna cling to the fact that Cardi B robbed some losers at a strip club 6 or 7 years ago forever, as though that's like the worst thing anybody's ever done. But with Tim, we're just ready to move on because he did a couple years in prison and that erases the fact that it ever happened. What it comes down to, I think, is that women have to work way, way harder than men do for the equivalent amount of success in rock. That sucks, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that there really aren't that many female artists in rock. I mean, I can't really blame them. Who would want to deal with all that bullshit? Why wouldn't you be like, you know what, fuck this, I'm gonna get a real job, or fuck this, I'm gonna go play pop or some other genre where I don't have to deal with this as much? I certainly can't fault them for that, and that's to the detriment of the genre. Before I move on, I wanted to mention two things really quickly. Number one, I thought about having a guest in this video, a woman, to talk about her experiences, but the reason I decided not to do that is because I know this video is going to upset a lot of people, and I felt like that might end up just putting this person in the crosshairs for a lot of abuse. So that's the reason why I chose not to. I don't know if that was the right call or not, but that was my thought process. Number two, I know that a lot of people are going to dismiss this as just like me being a woke SJW pandering to my audience and trying to virtue signal for social currency, but I will tell you that neither of those things are true. First of all, I will guarantee you that this video is going to get a very strong negative reaction, and I'm probably going to lose subscribers for it. My audience is almost all male and primarily metal fans who are not going to like this. And second, I'm not particularly woke. I own guns, I hang out with cops, like, I'm not woke, this is not pandering, this is just me observing the facts. Now, moving on, another thing I wanted to address is tokenism. For example, every time you see one of those articles like, top 10 female-fronted bands making waves in rock right now. I know that the people making those articles and everybody else who like champions female-fronted bands means well, but I don't think those terms are helpful because they're based on essentialism, which is the idea that people are fundamentally different based on their race or sex or body type or any of these other characteristics. In this case, that it defines them by their gender, reduces them to a woman in rock rather than a musician in rock. I thought Neko Case had a really good take on this when Playboy wrote some dumb article about her. Neko Case is breaking the mold of what women in the music industry should be. And she replies, am I? I'm not a fucking woman in music, I'm a fucking musician in music. Which I think is exactly right. By putting women in a separate category, basically what you're saying is that they're pretty good for a girl. You're othering them by putting them in their own little category, like here's the rock awards and here's the women's rock awards. Well, why would those be two separate things? Why should women be put in their own special little box over here? Especially considering that that means the underlying assumption is that the main category is for men. Shouldn't we just want everybody to be in the same category regardless of race or gender or anything else? And again, I know that these people mean well, but again, the problem with using the term female fronted or having a special category for women is that it's based on the same core principle as bigotry, the idea that people are fundamentally different based on race or sex or gender or any of those other things. Positive discrimination is still discrimination. And so you end up with this weird dynamic where it's like female artists are either hated and judged super harshly and they're the target of all this like harassment and criticism, or on the other hand, you put them on a pedestal and treat them like they're some sort of special object simply for being a woman who happens to play music. And neither one of those things is healthy. Both of those are based on the idea of essentialism. The third thing I wanted to talk about is all the sexist or misogynist lyrics and imagery in rock. In particular metal, I think, and for the most part, nobody really thinks anything of it. Like Cannibal Corpse can go play a song called Intros Ripped from a Virgin's Cunt and nobody thinks anything of it, but I make a video like this and people are gonna get super upset. So what does that tell you? The most common thing people will say about that is, oh, they're just doing it for shock value, or they're like playing a character, and I think that's probably true. Like, I don't think that all these death metal bands that use imagery of women getting mutilated or write these lyrics about that kind of stuff, I don't think that they necessarily hate women. Some of them do. Like, for example, there's a band called Female Nosebreaker. But let's say that's true and that it is primarily just for shock value. Well, it's still not cool, because of course it's going to make women feel at least a little bit uncomfortable, even if they know that. Like, for example, let's say that you're a woman who's into metal and you're like, you know what, I want to go see Cannibal Corpse, and you see some guy on stage grunt that this next song is called Fucked with a Knife, and then you see all these dudes in the crowd cheer him on. How would that make you feel? I don't know about you, but if I was a woman surrounded by dudes who are very excited about a song called Fucked with a Knife, I probably wouldn't feel very safe. And what I do know is that there's a lot of women who feel like they can't say anything about that, like they have to go along with it and pretend like they're cool, because if they don't, they're uptight. Because again, getting back to the double standards thing, when men speak up and voice their opinion, they're being assertive, but when women do it, they're being shrill and bitchy. That particular point is something I feel very strongly about, because I've seen this happen in the workplace a lot. Men who act like that get promoted because people see that as like a leadership characteristic, but women who act the same way tend to be just sort of pushed to the side because they're difficult or emotional. And I think that sucks. And you might be saying, all right, you made a couple of valid points, but I don't really think that's true, because look at all the female artists in metal and rock who are super respected. Arch Enemy, Spirit Box, Smashing Pumpkins, Ginger, Hailstorm, and that is true. Which brings up my last point, that I don't think it's quite as simple as saying that rock fans don't like female artists, although there is some of that. What I think they really, really don't like is female fans, or any artist whose fan base is primarily young and female. For example, let's look at these two comments. This is about Ghostmane. People who like his music are mainly edgy teenage girls who want to be alternative but only have the pink streaks in the front of their hair. And MGK is an aimless culture vulture, and his fans are teenage girls or women in their 20s who think getting piercings is a substitute for personality. Again, I don't agree with that, but let's say that it's true. What does being female have to do with that? Is it okay for men to act that way, but it's not okay for women to act that way? It's okay to be a guy with a pink streak in his hair, but it's not okay to be a woman with a pink streak in her hair? We've seen this happen so many times. The second an artist becomes popular with teenage girls, rock fans turn on them and hate them. I think that's a big part of why people hated like MySpace, metalcore, and deathcore. Talked about this before, but you know, Suicide Silence and Bring Me the Horizon, those are both super heavy bands that metal fans should have loved. And why didn't they? Well, I think a huge part of it is because of their fan base, because they had a lot of young girls who liked that band, and rock fans do not like artists whose fan base includes a lot of young women. Waterparks is another example of that. The list goes on and on and on. And again, it's an example of this double standard. Like, yes, of course, a lot of these fangirls are annoying because they're teenagers. Like, teenage guys are annoying too. Like, teenagers in general are irritating. But rock fans never talk shit about the fanboys. It's always the fan girls. Another one of the things you'll hear a lot is that they say, oh, they don't really like that band. They only listen to him because the singer's cute. Well, for one, we don't know that that's true. Who's to say that they don't actually like MGK or Ghostmane or Bring Me the Horizon or whatever? And number two, so what if that's the case? I mean, I think Jennifer Lawrence is pretty easy on the eyes, and when I go see a J-Law movie, I enjoy the fact that she is a very good actress and she tends to be in good movies, and she's also nice to look at. Is that so wrong? I don't think it is. Which gets to my point, again, the double standard. Rock fans never criticize men for doing the same thing. For example, Ginger. How many fans of that band simp for the singer Tatiana? I would say quite a few. Nobody has a problem with men who find her attractive, but as soon as a female fan finds the singer of one of their favorite bands attractive, she's instantly written off as a clueless fangirl, and they turn on that artist. Again, it's this like kind of gross incel energy. It's obvious why they act this way. It's envy and jealousy. These are guys who are jealous of the fact that other people are getting more female attention than they are. Plain and simple. Which, of course, is understandable. We've all felt that way before, but let me tell you, this is not the way to react. hating on a guy in a band or anybody else is not going to make women like you anymore. Trust me. All that does is just reek of insecurity, and women hate that. My advice is drop the hate. Try to be a little bit more open-minded and confident, and I think you will find that women are a lot more into that. And lastly, the credibility skill check that all female fans have to pass when they wear a band shirt. The whole like,
Cool Metallica shirt. Can you name 3 songs?
as though it's so hard to believe that a woman couldn't listen to fucking Metallica, one of the most commercially successful bands of all time that's been around for like 40 years. You doubt the fact that she could possibly listen to them based simply on the fact that she's a woman. And the flip side of that is that it's arguably even worse if you do pass the credibility check. Like, remember years ago, my wife had an Iron Maiden shirt, and I was like, I don't know, I don't think you should wear that. She didn't understand why until she did. She wore it to the mall, and she came back and she was like, oh my God, like 5 guys tried to talk to me because I was wearing an Iron Maiden shirt. So it's like, again, they're either hated or put on a pedestal. Like, oh my God, she likes Metallica, I'm in love with her. I don't know what's worse, the name 3 songs thing or stuff like this where they put a girl on a pedestal for it. So look, here's the bottom line. Like I said at the beginning, women are 50% of the population, so alienating that many people who are potential artists and fans is just not a good idea. Not to mention the fact that it's just like shitty to treat anybody that way. But if you care about the future of rock, you've got to speak out about this stuff, and we can't just tolerate it. It's not cool. You should be happy when an artist comes along like MGK or whoever that's bringing young girls into the scene, because guess what? As I've talked about before, teenage girls are the arbiters of pop culture. They are the ones more than any other group of people who decides what's cool, and you should respect that because, like it or not, they're the ones that hold the power here. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say about this. As always, I would like to know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you've seen some of this stuff. Let me know if you're a woman and you have experienced any of it, or maybe if you're a woman and you don't agree with anything I said. Would love to hear what you think. Please try to keep it respectful in the comments. I know this is a contentious topic, but I do think that it's possible for us to have a productive discussion about it, so let's try to do that. As always, before I let you go, I want to thank everybody who supports us on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get every podcast a week early. There's a members-only private Discord server that I'm in all the time. I do Q&As, I do giveaways. There's a way to have me review your music or artwork or anything else that you want to get my eyes and ears on. So if that sounds cool, you can join the Patreon at the link in the description. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.